You were a pumpkin.
I was a pumpkin, a big orange pumpkin.
A big orange pumpkin. And were there a lot of children out there?
Not so much.
No? Did you get a lot of candy?
Yeah, I got a lot of candy. Mommy's eating all the chocolate bars.
Well, tell Mommy that's your candy, honey.
Okay.
Tell her.
Stop eating all my chocolate bars, Mommy. Daddy's sick.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you live and around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free 800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV. And our radio site, where you can listen to the X-Zone 24/7, 365. www.xzoneradiotv.com. Well, X-Zone Nation, Jessica MARROCCO is our special guest this hour, and it is known fact that we all have hints of psychic ability. As a child, Jessica tended to daydream and stretch her imagination to the limits. It wasn't until her late 20s and early 30s that she began seeing visions in the form of a movie within her third eye or inner vision. Jessica can distinctly recall a particular vision where she saw herself wearing historical period clothing and interacting with someone who she apparently shared a past life with. Now, at the time, she was startled and not sure about what was happening. Little did Jessica know that she was tapping into the Akashic Records. Years later, she began to get more in-depth in her studies of meditation, clearing of karma, chakra points, and other psychic intuitive training. In time, Jessica became aware of that this ability could help others retrieve their past life experiences to identify how their present life is revealed through their past. Her website, www.readingsbyariel.com. And Jessica, welcome back to the X-Zone.
Well, thank you, Rob. How are you?
You tell me. You're the psychic. Sorry,
You sound like you're doing well.
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. Very kind of you to ask. Jessica, why don't you tell our listeners who may be listening to us for the first time on our new networks around the world a little bit about yourself and how you further developed your psychic ability?
Okay, well, it was one of those things that, if you ever talk to psychics, they'll typically tell you that at an early age, they had hints of this experience happening on a daily basis, and they didn't fully understand it, and many times, especially, I don't know, probably between the 60s and 70s and 80s, people didn't really accept these behaviors, so they thought, well, there's something wrong with the child, or the child has, is into the fantasy world and not really dealing with reality. We need to correct that. And so it's not highly encouraged. I was more introverted and didn't really express some of the things that I was experiencing. I did recall, seeing things when I was a very young child and seeing other dimensional space, just playing in the front yard, and where I was looking and I could see, that the air and the skies, sort of looked different to me. And I'd pointed out to people they weren't seeing the same thing that I was seeing. as well as some of the paranormal activity that was happening within my house. I found myself waking up early in the morning, in the middle of the night, and, actually being very frightened. I know a lot of people talk about this as a child where, because children are much more open and then they're subdued.
Right.
They're told not to, acknowledge this. This is, fictitious. This is not a reality. But children that are not told that learn to develop these abilities. And so in my case, because I didn't really express what was going on, no one really corrected me. So I just continued to open. But there were times when I was experiencing things that were clearly out of the ordinary, as well as one incident in particular where I found myself standing outside of my house. I was probably around 5 or 6 years old, and it was a lucid dream, I believe. It might not have been. It's really hard to tell some of these things, but I saw myself standing outside of my house in the middle of the night, no one else around me, wondering what I was doing out there by myself. And I happened to look up and seeing a spacecraft above my house. And, it wasn't until years later that, I don't have any recollection of being harmed in any way. I felt it was friendly.
Yeah.
I felt like it was just a point of contact. And me, amongst many others that have had contacts, were not necessarily negative, but rather just sort of, feeling like you were being observed, or that reconnecting in some way, having a purpose and being able to, see what's going on there.
So let's just stay with this contact for a second. What do you remember about it? What stands out in your memory the most?
Sure. What stands out in my memory is it was probably about in the middle of the night. There were no vehicles driving around. I knew that I had gone to bed. I was wearing pajamas, but
Right.
I was completely dressed as if I was outside.
Mm-hmm.
I was never outside by myself like that, where especially in the middle of the night, I knew that the door was locked, so I was locked outside. So I started to look around. One of the things that stood out to me very clearly was the perspective that I was observing, as if looking through what's called a fisheye lens. If you know anything about video work, it was distortion, and so it almost felt like my house was on top of the earth. It seemed very odd.
Mm-hmm.
I could almost look past buildings and see almost a curve, as if I was on some kind of summit, looking down and observing, the earth from a higher plane, a higher place. But it was just my house, my neighborhood. It didn't look like the typical way that the streets looked. That was one thing that stood out to me. And then I remember just looking above and noticing this light, and the light was right above. It was a sort of circular type of craft.
Wow.
And it was just hovering right over the house. And it was probably maybe 10 years later or less than that, maybe 8 years later. There's a band that from the area where I'm from, which is in the Boston area, Boston, Massachusetts, and it was called Boston. And the front of the album had the spacecraft, and I remember looking at the album saying, wow, that looks familiar. Well, how do I know that? And then triggering the memory of what had happened to me when I was younger. But it was the same type of craft. It was circular, and it had looked very similar, which made me think, well, maybe someone else saw it. And whoever did the artwork might have seen the same thing, and the band was from Boston. So, I never really got the story on that, but, I thought it was quite interesting.
Yeah, they were an excellent band. My memory serves me correct.
They were.
So since that first encounter that you had, have you had any others? Has there been any communication with you from anywhere?
Yeah, well, there was one other incident I just wanted to bring up in my childhood where I was in my den playing some music. I had, I was the younger of 6 siblings, and playing music, and this woman walked in. I'd never seen her before. I didn't know who she was. She asked me if I remembered her. I said no. And I was probably about 7, 8 years old. And just, looking at her, saying that, boy, this woman didn't look familiar at all, but she was kind of aggressive, a little bit on the hyper side, and was asking me to shake her hand. And I said, I didn't want to because I didn't know who she was. And then she kind of stormed out of the room, like very abrupt. And now I'm thinking, I'm going to get in trouble. I offended someone. I went in the kitchen, asked my mother where that woman went, and she said, "What are you talking about? What woman?" And I said, "That woman that was in the den." She goes, "I don't know what you're talking about. There was no one here." And I ran to the front of the house, and I started to think, I didn't hear any doors close.
Right.
I didn't see anyone leave. And, I mean, that was just, that was one of the many things that happened when I was younger, some just unexplained incidences. And, what ended up happening later was many years later. I mean, of course, I had some communications here and there, and I wasn't quite sure what it was all about.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was my imagination. I would put it aside. I would, a lot of different things, which I talk about in the book, The Seer, Violets in the Grass. Because then I start to unravel and kind of discover some of these things that did happen through past life regressions. But there was a significant incident that happened when I was around 29 years old, and just walking down the street. It's broad daylight. There were people walking around, and my third eye opened up, which I had no knowledge of this, and I wasn't raised around any of this type of information, and no one in my family were psychic. It didn't run in the family. So here I am walking down the street, and all of a sudden my third eye opened up, and it's like I'm watching a movie screen on my inner seeing, and I was observing myself in the time of the Civil War, and I could see how I was dressed. I was wearing a long dress. It was kind of pink. I knew by looking at it that it was originally red. And I was working outside. I had my hair pulled up, and then I saw that I actually got murdered. I'm watching myself get murdered. Now I'm upset. First of all, I'm upset that I'm seeing myself die. Second of all, that I'm wondering who that person is that killed me. And then the third part was, why am I seeing this? Now I'm frightened, what's happening? This is a really odd thing. Am I going crazy? What exactly is this? And it wasn't until about 10 years later that I had discovered the whole process of tapping into the Akashic Records, and then realizing that I was able to do that very easily. I ended up getting a certification with Linda Howe, but it wasn't until I started helping others that I realized that this actually has a purpose. It's not just me talking about my experience, or just the curiosity of seeing a past life.
Let me ask you a question here. When you saw yourself get murdered, how did you recognize yourself?
Well, that's something that I just sort of knew. I don't know how to explain it. I knew it was me. I could feel that it was my experience, and it's something else that people have asked me too when I'm doing readings for them. How do you know that you're looking at me? And it's like the soul energy is recognizable. It's similar. So if I'm doing a reading for an older woman or a young, you're not supposed to do these type of readings for anyone under the age of 18, but say 18, 19 years old, and they are a male or some other nationality or whatever, I can recognize them by their soul.
Why aren't you supposed to do readings of people who are less than 18 years of age?
Well, and according to Linda Howe's process of doing it, she felt that she recommended that we don't do Akashic record readings for anyone under the age of 18 because they're still working through their karma, and they're developing and making decisions. and you should really leave that alone until they get to an age where they're adults and they can make some changes.
Okay, what would happen if the person who is under the age of 18 never gets past the age of 18 because of something that you could help them with?
I think what the other way that she suggested, and I have done this before, is you go through the parent. And so you can do an Akashic record reading for the parent, and that way you're not interfering with anything, and then but still asking what's the highest and best for the child.
Okay, do you believe in reincarnation?
100%.
Okay,
absolutely.
All right.
I don't have any doubt in my mind.
Okay, so let me put this hypothesis to you. The child that you're sitting in, or the young adult, let's say 14, 15 years of age, sitting in front of you, has gone through previous lives. They're not, in fact, 14 or 15 years old. So I don't understand what the difference would be if you read them or not, based on the fact that reincarnation is part of this existence. Makes no sense.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with you. I think that's a good point. I don't know. I mean, I just, I didn't really question Linda. I felt like she had a reason for teaching this process.
Yeah, but her reason may not resonate with you.
No, and I've gone around it in different ways. The other thing I do is I was trained under Dolores Cannon's process of quantum healing technique, past life regressions, and I have done that and she didn't think there was anything wrong with it, so I just used that process as well. And I've actually used that with my son, who was underage, and it seemed to work really well. It made a lot of sense. So I agree with you. So if just, as a teacher, I just respected this is the way she does it. But I agree with you. I mean, if a child needs help, they need help.
Sure.
And so you do whatever you need to do to get them that help. And if it's a different process, maybe that's more agreeable.
Sure.
And that's how I approached it.
Tell me about the Akashic Records. Where are they? Who writes them? Who maintains them? What are they all about?
I feel like, I don't know, the best way that I can say my impression of this is it centrally located in any place. Some people believe it's under the pyramids. I have more of a feeling that it's in a celestial place. It's above us, somewhere in beyond the planet. What it feels like to me is it's a collection of documents, or like an extensive library, but not so much as books, but as video. It's just, I don't know, hours and hours and hours. Every single thing that's ever happened, has ever been done, is recorded. That's the best way I can say it. When you tell people that, sometimes they get freaked out, like we're being observed, but a lot of it's recorded within us. So if I do a reading with someone, I'm tapping into their recorded information. And then when I leave, I separate myself from it, because I don't need all of their information. They need that information. I don't need it. But that's where, people have triggered memories of different things. You don't need to go to a reader to tap into it. You can, travel somewhere, and then all of a sudden you're recognizing that you've been to that place before.
So you're talking about deja vu.
Yeah, definitely it's deja vu, and some unusual triggers, like a fear of something, and you've never had that. You don't know why you have that fear. Maybe a phobia of drowning, or a phobia of being in a confined space, and it could very well be linked to a very horrible experience that you had in a previous lifetime. Or maybe, you travel and go out west somewhere and, have an anxiety attack, and then you do a regression and discover that, maybe you were in the Old West and you got in a gunfight and died, and had that, that anxiety of just being triggered by going through that space. So that's why this work becomes very helpful to a lot of people. They can release whatever anxieties or stresses, and some of them have some serious problems.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be, discovered through accessing Akashic records or even past life regressions.
The last time you were on the show, you discussed a life between lives experience with an extraterrestrial abduction. Now, what is your opinion about this life between lives experience, and do you feel that the afterlife is a safe and protected place to be?
I believe it is, and I even think that, living your day-to-day life is safe. I think when you start looking at your experience as, your soul is eternal, so life is a part of the experience as death is, and death is just going into that next phase of the experience, and so having less fear about it. Some people believe that you begin your life and you're working towards death, but I think it's just this ongoing cycle of experiences. And so beyond the grave, you're still experiencing things. And in that one weird, odd incident where I had this memory of that kind of an abduction, extraterrestrials entering into the life between lives, which is just like anything, another dimensional space. So, people are, in a house and they say, well, it's haunted. They can tell that there's someone moving around and, moving things or just hearing noises or, technically that soul hasn't left. It's just, you don't see that soul. You don't see it in the three-dimensional space, but it's still the consciousness and awareness, and to them it's very real. They're able to move around and they're within the space because they still are in their home. That's what they remember. And so they're wondering what you're doing here. We're wondering what they're doing here. And it's just, kind of we're in the same space, but in another dimension. So it's the same thing. When you die, you just go into another location. And so that's why I try to tell people to be at peace with it. Just don't worry, don't get anxious, because it's all part of your experience.
Why do you think we have such a negative aspect when we look towards death instead of, it's a graduation. It's I call it the cocoon effect. We die, we go into a cocoon, and we come out somewhere else. Why do people fear death? I
think it's the fear of the unknown. It's like going into a dark building. You're not really sure. You want to put the light on. You want to get some feedback. You want to kind of get a little information before you go there. I really think it's just if people had more of a connection, and this is where I encourage people to do more meditation. When you're meditating and you go into that space of
I'm sorry. Did you say meditation or medication? We had a bit of a drop
meditation.
There. Meditation. Okay.
No, that was meditation. Yes, okay. And a big difference. Yeah, so when they go into, I encourage people to meditate, and when they meditate, you kind of can go into that semi-sleep state. You can get yourself relaxed enough, and when you're sleeping, people have said sleep is a form of death. You actually, your soul leaves your body, goes on this little experience, you call it dreams, and then it comes back into the body. So
well, I don't know if I agree. I don't know if I agree with that, because there's a big difference in physiology between dying and sleeping.
No, it is, but you do step out of your body a little bit. It's not 100%, but you step out your body. It's almost like kind of getting your feet wet in the water, but not actually jumping in. But you're kind of getting. It's sort of we're actually doing that in meditation as well. You step a little bit out of your body. And you're not 100% where you're actually dying and leaving completely, but you're almost kind of doing it before you do it, if that makes any sense.
No, I'm lost.
Okay. So they have done studies on it scientifically that when you're sleeping, that you can kind of see the body the soul steps a little bit out of the body. And that's where you start getting this information, all the dreams and everything. And sometimes some people believe you actually leave your body while you're sleeping for certain periods of time, or in like shamans and some of these old spiritualists will talk about, these experiences where the soul goes off on a journey and they sit there in a very dormant state. The physical body's dormant and they step out. So,
are we talking about an out-of-body experience?
Yeah, like an out-of-body experience. But I think it sort of happens when we're sleeping as well.
Okay. Listen, you and I have to take a commercial break. We'll be right back. X-Zone Nation, my guest this hour is Jessica MARROCCO. Her website is readingsbyariel.com. And we'll be back on the other side of this short commercial break as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. 800-610-7035, worldwide toll-free. Email xzone at xzoneradiotv.com on all social media networks. X-Zone Radio TV, and of course you can listen to the X-Zone live Monday through Friday from 8 p.m. Eastern until midnight on the X-Zone Broadcast Network and on the Starcom Radio Network. Speaking of which, check out my buddy Ed Till Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. exclusively on the Starcom Radio Network. My name is Rob McConnell. We'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away. Ever wondered if your advertising dollar is really working for you? If your ad would have been here, you and more than 4 million people would be listening to it right now. Contact ads at xzoneradiotv.com. How would you like to be able to read other people's minds? Well, the next best thing is here. When you know how to read a person's name, you know how the person thinks, feels, and behaves. Each letter in our name holds a key to unlock our true essence. Our name contains both our gifts and challenges in this lifetime. Mnemology science discovers personality secrets hidden in the placement of the letters of our names, including the first and last impression people remember about us. Sharon shows us how to interpret the arrangement of letters as outlined in her book, Know the Name, Know the Person. Sharon Lynn Wyeth created mnemology science after 18 years of research and testing her theories, and has supported thousands of people around the world in understanding themselves and others better. You'll enjoy Sharon's unique teachings as she shares her system to learn the gifts behind your given birth name. Even if you don't like your birth name, there are jewels in this book. If you're thinking of changing your name, ready to name your child, or wanting to get along better with others, this is the book for you. If you'd like to improve your relationships and change your life for the better, get the book today, Know the Name, Know the Person, or visit www.knowthename.com. That's www.knowthename.com. Manifestation is driven by imagination, intent, and passion. In our culture, all three have been distorted and disabled by modern media and exploitation. Re-engage your imagination and your passion by entering into the world of paranormal romance. Kahir O'Donnell takes her readers on an exciting journey into the endless possibilities of loving, passionate, and mutually respectful male-female relationship. Her latest book, The Long Dark Night, features special ops adventure, a daring rescue, a psychic woman from the stars, and a special agent that will die to protect her. The Long Dark Night by Kahira O'Donnell is now available at kahiraodonnell.com or amazon.com. What if someone told you you could live to be 120? Would you believe him? What if he told you the Bible guaranteed it? All you needed to do was follow his rules and buy his products. Would you do it? What if you invested 20 years of your life in him? What if he tested his substances on your child? What if your child became brain damaged as a result? Meet Dr. Tyler Belknap, a fast-talking Texas admin turned health guru. At the helm of a vast health food and supplement empire, he has established himself as the authority on nutrition and longevity. But what his followers don't know is that his products are laced with bizarre psychoactive substances from genetically modified plants developed in his very own secret lab. No wonder his customers can't stop using them. Tyler Belknap will stop at nothing to keep his edge in the market, even if it means experimenting on children. Chasing 120, a story of food, faith, fraud, and the pursuit of longevity, a novel from the pen of political cartoonist Monty Wolverton, is an easy and entertaining read full of rich characters and intrigue. It hits home in a world filled with all kind of hucksterism and offers a glimpse of what can happen when GMO technology falls into the wrong hands. Chasing 120 by Monty Wolverton. Get your copy today at www.ptm.org/120 or on Amazon.com. Good real estate websites are not just about showing listings, but offering visitors valuable information about neighborhoods, market statistics, tips, and personal insights. Luckily, you will find that on Roost, but you won't on many other real estate websites in Budapest. That's why we created Roost. Roost is a website with tailored results for the foreign investor, curated by Hungarian-loving expats who found their home abroad and decided to roost in Budapest. Let Roost help you get started on the right foot. Whether you intend to live, work, play, retire, or simply invest abroad, Roost offers all types of properties in Budapest, from affordable studios to luxury homes. From neighborhood insights like where to grab a great coffee or how to buy property, our team of local experts can answer your questions and speak to the direct concerns of a foreign investor. Buying foreign property is an exciting and complex adventure. It can also be very time-consuming and costly if you don't have the best information and resources at hand. Roost provides professional real estate services and assistance to an international clientele of foreign property investors and rental apartment owners in Budapest. For more information on Roost, visit their website at www.roost.co. That's www.rooste.co.
Hi, this is Ken Elliott. When I'm floating around the universe, I always try to tune in to Rob McConnell.
Hey, ho there, Trinity Frog on Sesame Street. When I want to find out what's going on with UFOs or ghosts, I listen to the X Zone with Rob McConnell.
This is Les Corrigan from Target Internet Development. You're listening to Rob McConnell on the X Zone Radio Show.
This is John Hogue, prophecy scholar, and you're listening to Rob McConnell in the X Zone.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. You're listening to us live and around the world on the X Zone Broadcast Network and Starcom Radio Network. My guest this hour is Jessica MARROCCO. Her website is readingsbyariel.com. Tell me about the conversation that you had with Sam Moranto about a Canadian government official that apparently, you took a lot of faith in.
I think I was talking to Sam Moranto. I had a radio show, and it's called Answers from the Universe on Little Spirit Radio. And so I interviewed him just out of curiosity, and we had a discussion about, some of the unusual paranormal activity, or particularly along the lines of UFOs. Mm-hmm. And that's the area that he specialized. He had, quite a few different experiences with it on a personal level, and then began investigating and was on television, had been interviewed through, I believe, Ancient Aliens and some other well-known productions. Now, one of the things that we did talk about was, I believe it was it a Secretary of Defense Hellyer? You can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not Canadian, but it was a while back, and this may or may not be true, but I was curious about it. That he had claimed that there were not just one type of extraterrestrials, but multiple. And so that was the discussion we went back and forth on.
Well,
do you recognize that conversation?
Yeah, I've had the opportunity of interviewing Paul Hellyer, the former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, as well as the former Secretary of Defense, Minister of Defense, I should say. And during his tenure as Minister of Defense, he had never heard anything about UFOs. All his interest and so-called expertise happened after he left office, after his retirement, after reading books on UFOs.
Okay.
Yeah. So when it comes to Mr. Hellyer, he's made a lot of claims, everything from Planet Serpo to, oh my gosh, all the different alien species. But once again, it's based on books that he's read, no personal experiences whatsoever. And I asked him point blank, during his time as the Secretary or the Minister of Defense, had he ever had any information cross his desk, or was he ever briefed by a member of the military, pertaining to UFOs over Canada? And he said point blank, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I did want to ask you that question, because first of all, I'm American.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, the only thing I could see is on YouTube, and you can't really verify everything that you see on there, which is obvious.
Yeah.
And so, although Sam did not, he just went by what I knew, and that, and probably many others around the world see that, that ufologists are just curious about it. They're just like paranormal investigators. They're looking for the facts. They're not looking for any of the sensationalism of it.
Wait a sec.
Most of them are not.
Come on. Anybody who's in the UFO field today, whether it's cryptozoology, UFOs, ghosts, whatever, they're all looking for their 5 minutes of fame.
Well, true, but I think some of them are genuinely just trying to figure it out. Now, I come from another perspective. I mean, I feel like I see them anyhow. But in that, that's from some people's perspective, that's crazy. From someone else, it's curious. But, I've interviewed many people from the paranormal field as well as the ufology field. And you know how they are. I mean, there are some that, they like the sensational. They want to be able to say they're the first ones to see something or find it.
They're whack jobs.
I understand that.
They're whack jobs. They should be on Ritalin or something. You get these wannabe celebrities who who don't know their elbow from their foot from the way they talk, that they're God's gift to the extraterrestrial community. They know everything about ghosts. They know everything about this, that, and the other thing, and yet they can never give you any proof. You see, and that's what the difference between that's the difference between a wannabe and someone who says, we can't find anything. Right,
someone like Sam Moranto, I didn't feel like he was on the. I know exactly what you're talking about, and I understand. There are people that are extreme and are looking really for fame, and they're sensationalists. They're definitely trying to appeal to the being on television and get that attention. But there are some that are more fascinating with they're more fascinated with their equipment than they are with anything else. To be honest with you. Yeah. Some of my experiences. So they're kind of, I don't want to say the wrong word, but they're kind of nerdy, in that sense, where they kind of like are trying to figure out, and they're measuring things, and they're looking at the temperature, and it's more of that sort of thing. And a lot of those people, you don't ever hear about them because they're kind of more behind the scenes. But the ones that are on television, they're trying to appeal to the masses, and they're sensational and over the top, and we don't know how much is scripted. actually. And
they're whack jobs.
That's part of the critique.
Let's call it the way it is. They're whack jobs. I've never heard of Sam Moranto. Never heard of him.
Yeah, he's a very sensible guy. If you, I believe he was on Ancient Aliens and a few other shows. And,
talk about
really
a scripted show. Talk about a scripted show. Look at Giorgio's hairstyle, for God's sake. Come on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, all right.
Sensationalism 101 lives well with Giorgio Tsoukalakis.
Yeah, he's very dramatic.
Oh, is he ever?
Yeah, celebrity. He's a celebrity at this point. But yeah, Sam, if maybe I'll share with you the interview sometime and you can listen to it. I felt like, he was just more curious than anything and didn't really, wasn't emphatic about anything at all, actually. Just curious, trying to figure it out and from experience in his childhood when people were claiming to see some kind of an unexplained flying object by where he lived, and from there just piqued his interest.
Sure.
But seemed to be a very sensible guy. I think you might agree, as opposed to some of the others.
Tell me about your career as a certified hypnotherapist.
Okay, well, I had I learned the hypnosis process through a gentleman by the name of Alphonse Tartarunas, who is currently almost 90 years old.
Wow.
Started learning about hypnosis when it really wasn't popular at all.
Mm-hmm.
And he had multiple academic degrees, one including Harvard University. But he's not really very ego-based. He doesn't try to do anything other than use his abilities to help people with stress relief. And as a matter of fact, he's so spry and so alert right now at the age of 90. I went with him and he did a presentation to a large group of real estate agents. So he's still out there working, drives, very coherent, and doesn't even take money for doing hypnosis for people.
Bless him.
Just wants to help out others. This is one of my mentors. I respect him a great deal, and I think he's a wonderful person, but also highly professional.
Well, I've got a good doctor.
Yeah,
I've got a good doctor that helps me with my stress. It's Dr. Jack Daniels.
Okay, yeah, he talks about that too.
So
that's very funny.
So tell me, when you're putting somebody into a hypnotic regression, how far back in their lives do you take them?
What the first thing I do is try to primarily get them relaxed, just relaxed enough, and it depends on what the question or the need is. So if they're trying to figure out something in the here and now, what happened, why am I, halting and I can't move forward, whether it's a relationship or, having trouble with their career, we might just explore an earlier time in their childhood where, something traumatic happened, maybe there was some kind of, big disruption or argument or some incident where maybe they lost their home when the person was a child. And something that just made them feel like they couldn't enjoy life, or some bad incident that's kind of buried in the subconscious. So maybe you'll go back into that point in their childhood and find where that area is, bring it to light, they understand it, and then at that point, then they can kind of get through that barrier. It's a psychological barrier that prevents them from being successful in whatever area that they're focused on. Now, working with past life regressions and going further back in time to a previous lifetime, that's another type of exploration. And here again, it could be a multiple process where you just go to early childhood for a phobia, and then you can't find anything there, and you go before that time.
So it's a matter so it's a hit and miss.
Well, it has to do with what are we looking for? Because if you're just randomly just trying to do a regression, then it will become a hit or miss. You don't really know what you're going to get. And so at some point, whatever is the strongest need or whatever in your subconscious to get this information out, that's what will come up. But for the most part, I think it makes more sense for people to have an intention of what they want to find. So that's how I approach it.
How long does it take to cure someone using hypnosis?
Well, my belief is that we cure ourselves. So helping a person to recall or remember whatever the incidents, it can vary. It could be one session. And I'll be honest with you, I've had many people come to me and never come back again, and not because they were angry or anything bad happening, but that they smiled and they were now it makes sense, I get it, and they're okay. And I might bump into them, maybe a year or 2 years later, and they seem to be fine and moving forward with their lives. And so, for me, that was what needed to happen. There are people that have come to me multiple times, but that was their choice, and they wanted to explore different things. So it varies, just like anything else.
Do you find that men or women use past life regression more than the other?
I would say the more women.
Yeah.
But I also feel that more women are into the alternate practices. Maybe if you go to a meditation class, there's probably more women than men. However, I was surprised that there are many men that are open to it. They are very curious, and for the same reason, they feel like they relate to some past life experience and felt like they were, whether they were a warrior or they had, maybe lived during World War I or had some other unusual experience that kind of they feel connected to. So I was surprised to find out that more men were interested in it than I thought they would be. But for the whole, I do notice that more women are interested in these practices.
How would someone know that they need the help of a hypnotherapist?
I think that hypnotherapy is usually something that a person considers when they have a habit that they just can't break. So you find that more people go for hypnosis when they're trying to quit smoking, or if they have a problem with drinking, maybe they have anxiety, something that is they've kind of exhausted other avenues.
Would this mean that the person has a very weak personality, that they can't solve their own issues, so they're going to go to someone else who they'll listen to and ultimately get the solution put in place where they don't have that problem anymore?
Yeah, well, and I wouldn't call them weak. I don't really understand why some people have more of a challenge with a habit or an addiction, or why addictive personalities. I don't claim to be a psychotherapist, but I will say that people when a person has problems, that they're either going to their medical doctor or they're getting in some form of troubles. If a person has problems sleeping at night, eventually, it's very disruptive to their lives, so they have to figure something else out. And then, of course, the problem of being addicted to cigarettes. And
you just mentioned something, that you're not a psychotherapist, and yet you're dabbling with the person's psyche.
Right.
So where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line?
I talk to them and I explain to them that there's certain areas that I try to help people, direct them to solve their own problems. I don't feel that I have the right to tell them how to think, and I don't have the right to judge them in any way. So if they really feel like they have issues or they're on medication, then that's something that has to do with the medical doctor and not me.
Hey, Jessica, we've got to say so long for tonight. Our time has just ended, my dear. I want to thank you so much for joining us. Exo Nation, if you'd like more information about Jessica MARROCCO, visit her website at www.readingsbyariel.com. I'll be back on the other side of this news break at the top of the hour at 6.5 minutes past as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Visit us online at www.xzoneradiotv.com, and you can listen to the X Zone 724-365 at www.xzoneradiotv.com. My name is Rob McConnell. I'll be back shortly. Don't go away.